Hey everyone, welcome back to the All Music Matters on That podcast. I'm your host, Brian. Today, I welcome a very special guest. We got Kevin Dodson, who's part of the band. And I'm sorry I pronounced it wrong here too, but you can slap me if I pronounce it wrong. The Madrigal Project. Is that pretty good?
It's actually pronounced the Madrigal Project.
Madrigal. So yeah. I know it sounded like it was some sort of Spanish or some sort of European surname there too, so I want to make sure it was something like that. So, and I guess recently we can now do a little promotion. You guys released a new album, so I guess let's go ahead and talk about that real quick.
Yeah,
11th Hour.
11th Hour. Yeah, 11th Hour is the product of it took about 7 years to put the record together, and that's not, I'm not Bill Bruford, I'm not Steven Wilson, I'm not somebody who gets up every day and my job is to be Bill Bruford.
It'd be nice.
I have two daughters, and I'm not. My situation is one in which I wasn't able to work on this every single day, And then when people like Adam Holtzman and Billy Sherwood from Yes and got involved, those are busy people, They're out on the road with Yes or Asia, or they're out with Steven Wilson or whoever, and yeah, sure, Kev. Now this might be hard for your listeners to. I don't know if they know about this, or in the recording field, we work with things called stems. You know what a stem is? Okay, great.
A little bit, yeah. Actually, it was called Epidemic Sounds, and actually they would give you the stems, like certain parts of like songs, for instance, too. So it's the individual parts. That's what I like to call it too. So
what it is, it's really a mini mix elements. So you'll have the drums, stereo track, the bass, guitars, keyboards all separated out, so that on your end, when you receive those stems, you can make your own mix, right? You can mix your own. Oh, I don't really want to hear very much keyboards. I just want to hear the guitar and the bass and maybe a little drums, right? And then I'm going to play my bass part to that. And it gives them that ability to have that kind of separation for what they want to do. And then they lay their track down, and then they send it back to me, which is another interesting thing that we'll talk about probably later about how this record came together. It's if you looked at it on paper, you'd say, that ain't going to work, because I'm a producer, and since all these years, I've produced other bands, I've produced things, television stuff, and I'm used to being in the room with Billy. Hi, Billy. Play this bass part. Okay, well, I like that, but can we change that and make that go halftime with that? Well, how does that sound when you go to the B natural, whatever, you can actually produce. These guys, basically, I had to just give carte blanche and just say, here, I would give them basic directives. I'd give them an idea what I was looking for. Maybe I'd use a couple of example songs. Have you ever heard Gates of Delirium by Yes? Well, I'm the bass player for Yes. I play it, so yeah, I've heard it. Or something like that, right? I didn't say that to him or anything. I'm just saying that was the way we'd communicate on the song. Then they would go to their corner and they would do their part. And the uncanny thing, Brian, this is what amazed me throughout the whole making of this record. And not just Billy, not just Adam, but Oliver, all of them. Almost every time that they would send me a track, it was perfect. It was like, which is uncanny. I come from a world where there's always something you got to change. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't a certain amount of, I had to do a certain amount of editing, and maybe I would go back. Like there was one time on a song with Oliver that I had him. Well, he even talks about it, where I had him double up the organ solo, things like that. But for the most part, man, these guys they're so good. They're that good that what they would give me was magic. It was just like, just add water makes its own gravy. I mean, I don't have to do much as a producer, except for, I did things with it. But the point I'm making is that shouldn't have worked like that. It should have been like back and forth. And instead of taking 8 years, it should have taken 16 years, But what those guys did, they're such brilliant players. was, I am so grateful and blessed that they came along in my life at the time that they did, because I don't honestly believe 11th Hour would even be here, or I would even ever have a chance to have my work finally ultimately heard by a wider audience, and I'm so grateful for that, man. I mean, so that kind of takes care of that, I guess. But yeah, next question.
All right, Kevin, welcome to my podcast right here. So the way it's going to work is just going to ask you some questions. Let's get to know the man behind the set, but also the individual as well here too. So I think you got an interesting history here too. So I think we can learn a lot from you too. So this ought to be interesting. So you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. So I guess we'll start back in the beginning when you were just a wee little lad. And I guess you were probably, since you're the drummer too, I imagine it'd start with the pots and pans. But tell us your backstory here too. So how did you become a musician?
Well, you want me to go back that far? Okay,
Yeah.
well, I
Grandpa.
come from a somewhat musical background. My grandfather was a saxophone player, musician. In his name was Norton Jennings. His stage name was Jiggs Jennings. And he worked with Bing Crosby and Mel Blanc. Now, some people know who Mel Blanc is because he's the voice characterizations for Warner Brothers. Well, a lot of people don't know he was a big band singer before he got that gig. And my grandfather toured with Bing Crosby and Mel Blanc, and then met my grandmother, and didn't go to L.A. with Bing and all those guys. And I wouldn't be here if that decision wasn't made. So, good thing. I've always played. I can remember, and my mom thinks this is, or thought, she's no longer with us, but she thought it was amazing that I could remember when I was like 3. They had bought me this red plastic. It was like a almost looked like a djembe or something. It was like I remember it. And that was the first thing I ever pounded on. And then my mom was a musician, and she was a jazz singer, a piano player, and a drummer. And in our basement, we had a little cocktail jazz kit. It was a little 20-inch kick drum, piccolo snare drum. There wasn't any tom. There was a floor tom, and it was a floor tom that belonged to my grandfather. It was an old floor tom. I don't even know what brand it was, and it had a cow skin head on it still, with cigarette burn holes in it. It was like, history sitting right there. And I used to go down and start playing, and my mom knew I had an interest in it, and so she got me lessons with a guy locally around here where I'm from named Howie Robinson. He had a drum and fife corps called the Percussionauts, and I was a percussionaut for a couple of 2-3 years. And then I studied privately with a jazz drummer named Tom Kelly, who's local here. And then pretty much after that, we'll get into the story now, Madrigal, when I was 18 years old. Well, we got back a little further. When I was about 15, I heard Yes on the radio. And it changed everything for me. I mean, I can't really even articulate what it did to me. It was monumental. And from that day forward, started searching out. I didn't even know the term progressive rock, but I started searching out musics of that nature. And when I was a kid, I didn't even know I had progressive rock proclivities, because when I was a kid, I used to, like 8 or 9 years old, I remember this. I used to walk this is back when you could walk around when you were 8 years old and not get nabbed, usually. I would walk to the public library, and in those days, they'd sit you in a booth and give you some headphones, right? And you'd sit in this booth with headphones on, and you'd say, I want to hear War of the Worlds, the original broadcast by Orson Welles. I want to hear Peter and the Wolf. I fell in love with Peter and the Wolf, which is why I fell in love with French horns. I love the sound of a French horn. Anyway, so when I formed Madrigal, it was because I had that love of prog rock. Little did I know it was 1977, and Johnny Rotten was forming the Sex Pistols and designating progressive rock the enemy at that point. And and that's kind of where we started. We started, I was 18, keyboard player was, we were all kids. And the first thing we did was we took a poem by Samuel Coleridge called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and we wrote an 18-and-a-half-minute piece of music. We were heavily influenced by Genesis and Gentle Giant, King Crimson, 10cc. I love 10cc. There's somewhat of a history to it in the sense that we used to be just called Madrigal back when we did the first two albums. And we it's kind of the common behind the music sort of story. We signed a horrible distribution deal with a label that I will not mention. They're French and they're progressive. You fill in the blanks. And as a result of which, I never got any inventory of product that was produced, where it was distributed. This is back, by the way, before the proliferation of digital media, online, and all that. It was all albums and CDs, and so they kind of commandeered my work. They stole my intellectual property essentially, and I never got any. I tried to get a hold of them, and they're French, and they would always conveniently not be able to understand me when I was on the phone, right? Because I speak English. So as a result of that, I talked to an entertainment lawyer who advised me that the only way I could gain any control, I had the copyrights, right? I own the copyrights, I own the publishing, but which was great on the back end for royalties, but it was horrible in terms of mechanicals and knowing what the heck was going on with my own music, where it was going and what was going on with it. So I talked to an entertainment lawyer, and he said, the only way you're really going to be able to get control back of your music would be to reissue the album, actually take both albums. There were two of them. The first one was called Madrigal Waiting. The second one was Madrigal on My Hands. And he said, take both those albums, combine them, and then maybe add 2 or 3 unreleased songs to differentiate your release from, I almost said the name of the label, from their release. Wouldn't that be just apropos and the cherry on the top of the cake if they sued me for defamation, Anyway.
Yeah, can't have that. So I can say why. Yeah.
Well, I put it out as a compilation album, and for the longest time it was going through TuneCore, and you could get it on Spotify and Pandora and Bandcamp and all over. I've since pulled it. The reason being, I'm with a new company. With the release of this record, we want to regain even more control and be able to reissue it. I want to remaster it, for one thing, because it was all recorded on that Fostex 8-track tape deck up there, which you might not be able to see in your frame. But back in those days, it was prior to the digital revolution, and it was the current technology to be able to have an 8-track quarter-inch tape. That was the big deal, because most of the time it'd be half-inch. Which really what it did was it created tape source limitations, production-wise, in the sense that the width of music, and we know now through mastering and stuff that you have side imagery and what have you. With those two records, they're kind of like this, for lack of a technical way to put it, but it's sort of down the center like this and not out wide like I'd like it to be. So I want to remaster. I'll probably end up using Andy Van Det again to help me with that, as he's great and knows what he's doing. So anyway, that's kind of what happened. And also, we discovered when we were going to put this record out, we didn't know if we wanted to, and I never wanted it to be the Kevin Dodson album. It's like, who's Kevin Dodson? Oh, he's some drummer from Spangle, Washington. Who knows him? Nobody. And so, I was never really for that. And we were banting around the idea of using Madrigal. And I said, well, I really don't like, there's so much baggage, so much, history, that there's great history with it, and then there's that undercurrent of bad history. And also through, I went and talked to a trademark attorney who was going to trademark the name. He did a search and he found out that there's like 500 people that own the trademark on Madrigal. And if it's in a different industry, like if it's a clothing store versus a athletic drink store or something, you can have the same name because you're not in the same thing. But the point being, Madrigal was all over the place, and it was also being used by other bands. Right? There were other bands that were using it, and there's another story that goes into that, which I'll go into in a moment, which hopefully I am going to name the people on the company and the people on this one, because I've tried to get a hold of them. I've done my part in due diligence. Spotify has my records on my first two albums on their site, and they have the wrong artist attributed to it. And it's been like that, my friend, since about 2012. So a whole bunch of people out there that may buy this record, I know. And I've gotten a hold of them and I've said, hey, can you, but you can't try to call somebody. It's, at Spotify or Pandora or Google, especially Google or YouTube. Nobody talks to people anymore. You cannot reach a human. You will not reach a human. And as a result of which, I've made request after request. They're ignoring me. And so I'm telling you this story in the sense that we came to the idea that what would be best would be to rename it. But I thought, well, the first two albums did do pretty well, especially in Europe. In the UK, couldn't get arrested over here, but but it did pretty well. And so I didn't want to really leave that history behind all the way. I wanted people to be able to make the coalition, make the connection. And so Dave Siebert, the guy I was telling you about earlier, came up with the idea of, well, what about the Madrigal Project? And we did a search for trademark, and it's free and clear. So I'm in the process right now of trademarking that name. And we were blissfully ignorant to the fact that punk rock had overnight made what we were doing. I was 18 years old and I was a dinosaur. We were so unfashionable. And I've told this story before. I'll tell it really briefly, but I had the opportunity to have audience with a guy named John Poneman over in Seattle, who started Sub Pop Records. And I had our first album waiting. And I had audience with him and an opportunity to play the record for him. So we're driving around Seattle in his car and we're playing the CD, and he's deadly silent. I mean, it was almost like the air got sucked out of the car and everyone's driving around, And he pulls the car and he goes, this just has this is just not anything that I would be interested in. It's in fact, this is the kind of music we're trying to, destroy, basically, is what he told me. I said, okay, thank you very much, Mr. Poneman. Drop me off at the next block. I'm sorry. And that's how blissfully ignorant I was to the grunge movement, which came a little later, but the punk rock movement, I knew about that there was that going on, but I had no idea that they had earmarked progressive rock as the bastard stepchild of rock and roll, and we must stop it. We must kill it. It got to a point where you'd go into a record shop, and you'd say, you'd buy all this, you'd have all these records, right, that you're buying, you'd have some Steely Dan and whatever, and then you'd come look around. You got any prog? It was a nasty word, You got any prog? Oh, yeah.
It was like guy crack off the street or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, like couldn't talk about it. It was like porno or something. He'd put it in a brown paper bag and hand it to you underneath the counter, It was
like you got the prog, yeah. You got the prog. So, yeah.
You're a prog guy? Everybody would laugh,
Yeah. Gee.
I knew how to, when we had parties in those days and it was time for everybody to go, I knew what to do. I would just put on some Bonnegraph Generator or Captain Beefheart, and the place would empty out in 2 minutes. So, anyway,
Captain
that's
Beefheart.
where we started. We wrote Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. We only played 2 live gigs, and the story goes on from there. It's very, very, it's such a long story and so many aspects to it. It's very difficult for me to give you the elevator pitch of the story. Suffice it to say, as we got older and we couldn't get arrested, couldn't make money, we hadn't done a record yet, and so we became a cover band, so that we could have a couple dollars for a cheeseburger once in a while,
Yeah.
And
Back to what you said earlier. What's a Captain Beefheart? Was that actually the band name?
there's Don Van Vliet. Captain Beefheart is probably about the most obscure music. Well, it's not anymore as obscure as it used to be. He was a buddy of Frank Zappa's. He came up through Frank Zappa, and there's an infamous album called Trout Mask Replica, which musicologists have called brilliant. I will tell you right now, if you put that record on right now, you would go, "What is this crap, man? Stop it. You're killing me. This is horrible." The first time I heard it was at my buddy Curtis's apartment. I walked in and he was playing it, and I went, "What are you What is your stereo broken? What's happening here?" But it's one of those kind of things that as I got deeper into eclectic musics and things, you get deeper into it. You hear it the second time, you go, it's still pretty bad, but I could kind of make out something. By the time you get to about the 4th or 5th listen, you're going, wow, this is like the most unique music you will ever hear, And so Captain Beefheart, though, was such, like, if I wanted people to leave my house, put on Trout Mask Replica, and they'd be like, "What are you? Put on Boston, for the love of God." No, go home. I'm going to crank up my Beefheart, okay? Have fun.
Yeah, that they want you to turn on the journey. The Don't Stop Believing for like the millionth time. So yeah.
Exactly. Make the girls happy. Anyway.
Yeah, maybe you get them to sing along with the lyrics there too. So I mean, that's they did something right.
Faithfully. Sorry, I should have done that. But
No, you're good. You're good. It's a good comedic entertainment here too, so it's all good.
Yeah, so historically speaking, if you wanted to go back that far, that got me to the door of Madrigal, and then Madrigal became a cover band throughout pretty much the 80s until the very end of the 80s. I couldn't take it anymore, and the guitar player that I was playing with at that time, we broke off, Steve Dornbreyer, and we did the first Madrigal album, Waiting. That was in 1988, when I was 29. And we put that out, and then then it broke up again, and I played in various cover bands and did various jobs like all musicians do, to keep active. But towards the latter part of the 80s, I had gotten into audio production. I actually became a studio drummer and a session drummer, and there were only 2 games in town where I'm from. I live in a very, well, it's not so small anymore. It's growing every day. But I live in a town called Spokane, Washington. And if you know anything about Washington State, you got Seattle, which is west of me, and we're more inland. We're called the Inland Northwest, and we're the capital of the Inland Northwest is Spokane, Washington, right on the border of Idaho and Washington State. And when I got involved in doing session work, there were only 2 games in town. There was the production group and I've forgotten the name of the other place now. Wagner Studios, I think. And I kind of became the guy for whatever reason. I was sort of the guy they'd call, to come and do sessions and stuff. And through that, I was the fly on the wall, right? I would watch my buddy Bill Byrne, have the deepest respect for Bill Byrne and David Siebert, who were producers, engineers at that time. And this is old school. We were using an Atari 2-inch, tape. There was no digital until later on. And so you couldn't punch in drums. I think that's part of what made me, even though I wasn't much of a reader, I could go in and I could play the track, right? From beginning to end, because you had to. Try to punch in a drum kit with cymbals ringing out everywhere. Good luck, And I actually did some sessions where they'd have me go in for separation. I'd play just the kick and snare, and then they'd say, okay, now just give me the hi-hat, now give me just the cymbals. And then they put it all together as one performance. Now, they had a click, so you could keep things pretty well straight. But as far as a feel and it felt like a drum machine. You know what I mean? It felt more like a drum machine than a drummer. But they sometimes wanted to have that separation for whatever reason. Anyway, I came up through the studios at that time, and I ended up joining a very popular, if you've ever heard of not a tribute band, but a show band. There were these young kids that were only like 15, 16, 17. And they
back
played,
in the day, yeah. So, yeah.
And they played 50s, 60s music, and they wore tuxedos. And they did, impersonations of Buddy Holly and Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis. And I got a call from my agent one night, and he goes, hey, man. And I knew who Men in the Making were. They were called Men in the Making. And he goes, I knew who they were. And he goes, hey, they're down at Thudpuckers, and they need a drummer right now because their guy quit on them, and the place is packed. And there I was. And so I went down these. He goes, do you own a tuxedo? And when I just happened to have a tuxedo because I was a lunch waiter at that time at a place called the Gingham House, and I was the lunch waiter, and you had to wear a tuxedo at this place. It was an old restored Tudor man. It was like a 1850s mansion, right? So anyway, so I show up with a tuxedo. These little sprouts come running up to me. Hey, do you know Johnny B. Good? Relax. I know it. Anyway, so I got into that group, and they made insane money. Insane money. Bought me 2 houses. I mean, I made more money being in a cover band doing that. Now imagine a guy whose love is prog, right? And I'm up there doing a Johnny Cash impersonation. I know that you're looking at me like, what the hell is this man talking about? I actually did a Johnny Cash impersonation.
Well, you see, old man, we got to talk about that ragged old flag over there. So, yeah. I guess, did you do ragged old flag, or did you do more of like a Ring of Fire?
Well, it was always Folsom Prison Blues and then Ring of Fire. I would do Folsom Prison Blues, but in the center of the song, I would go out in the audience and change the words. I would sing songs from the 80s, with the audience. Like I go, oh, Mickey, you're so fine, you blow my mind. Hey, Mickey, and the whole audience would be, and laughing, and I'd make jokes, just it was entertain, being an entertainer as much as being a musician or player, performer. So anyway, I did that for a number of years, and then I got back together with Madrigal, still while doing Men in the Making, and we started to play shows around, and we did the second album, and then that group broke up, and when we broke up, probably about I don't know, it was maybe a half a year, 6, 7, 8 months later, I get a letter, because back then they didn't have email and stuff. I get a letter from Prog Fest. We want Madrigal to play Prog Fest. And the headliner, I believe, that year was Yes. And I had to say, I'm sorry, I don't have a band.
Bad timing. So yeah.
Back on that, Brian, that day, and having to write that letter, I look back on that as a turning point. It was right at the precipice of Marillion, becoming huge. There was a rebirth of prog rock at that particular time, and all these bands started to get popular again, playing prog. And of course, I couldn't take advantage of it because I didn't have a band, couldn't go. And I look back on that and I think, that would have maybe been where Madrigal would have launched, and we may have had a chance of actually having a real career, but it didn't happen. And so there was no Madrigal anymore from that day forward. But I continued to write. Writing for me, writing progressive music for me is like breathing. I have to do it. It's not, I think I'd like to go, it's like, I just have to do it. Okay. It's in me and it just has to come out. And so I was writing all along, and a lot of people don't understand when I say, yeah, well, when I was in college and I was 38 years old, I wrote 11th Hour. And they think, oh, you've been working on 11th Hour since the 90s, all the way up to now, and you finally got the song done? No. The beginnings of the song were written, shoved into a drawer somewhere and to collect dust, only to be rebirthed later when I started to do this record. I started auditioning some of the songs I wrote, the ones that meant something to me, that had autobiographical, because the record is autobiographical to a large degree, and the songs that meant something to me, that told a story that meant something to me, I involved in the record. Now, people might ask me, well, what does this song mean, and what does that song mean lyrically? And I'm reticent to answer those kind of questions, because I don't want people to have my interpretation of it. Because one of the great things about prog lyrics, progressive rock lyrics, is that they're open to everyone's own interpretation, to where they can apply that to their experience and their life and their thing. I don't want to intrude on that, with my thing. So I'll sometimes give little inklings of what it meant to me, but I don't get too far into that, So I hope that answers that first question. It's been a half an hour, and I've answered 2 questions. Okay.
Actually, I'm curious, how did you meet the guys from Yes? Because the other song I pretty much heard, and I think unfortunately most people would say that the song Roundabout is what people would know about Yes. And unfortunately, I think the other ones just get kind of shelved. So it's kind of tragic. So I guess, how'd you meet the guys from Yes?
Or Owner of a Lonely Heart, if you were born in the 80s and 90s. Well, what happened was, I got a friend of mine who also appears on the record. His name's Harry Fix. He played a little bit of keyboards and sang some of the vocals on the song I'm No One on 11th Hour. Harry is an accomplished jazz pianist, great player. And when he was going to Berkeley, or was it Occidental? I think it was Berkeley, he met Adam Holtzman. And they became really good friends. And Adam had, now a lot of people don't know who Adam Holtzman is, but a lot of people know who Miles Davis is. So the first place I start with Adam is that he was the keyboard player and music director for Miles Davis for like 4 years. And he then went on to work with many other artists, but he is now the keyboard player for Steven Wilson. You know who Steven Wilson is, I would hope. A lot of people don't, so don't feel bad.
I have to confess, it's actually my dad. He's introduced me to a lot of the classic rock groups. He only knows like maybe some prog. I think the biggest one he would tell you is Jethro Tull. It's probably like the one he listened to the most. So he heard it like Yes, and then King Crimson, but they never really like got into it. So they were more like your traditional classic rock sort of guys, the heavier sort of ones too, when you think of Van Halen and Motley Crue. Mm-hmm. So sorry, I don't know who Mr. Wilson is. So.
Absolutely no worries. It's a niche genre, man. It's like, and that's cool. Harry knew Adam. Adam had started working for Steven Wilson, and Steven Wilson is very well known in the progressive progressive rock scene. He's very well known. In fact, he's sort of the godfather of new prog. he's known for quite a bit for remixing and remastering for 5.1 all of the entire catalogs of some of these bands, my heroes, like of Yes, Jethro Tull, Genesis, King Crimson. He's done a lot of those, right? And
Genesis, forgot about Genesis, yeah.
yeah, I love Genesis, man. They're one of my major influences. Anyway, so he's known for that, but then he's also got a band called Porcupine Tree that a lot of younger people are aware of that band more than they are of his solo band. Adam's not the keyboard player for Porcupine Tree, but he's the keyboard player for the Steven Wilson band. Well, they were playing in Seattle, and one day, I think it was 2017, I believe, or 16. And Harry calls me up and he says, "Hey, you want to go to the Showbox in Seattle and see the Steven Wilson group?" He had told me Adam was a friend of his. He goes, "We can get backstage and we can meet Adam. You can talk to him." So, cool. So we go to the show, and I admit, I had never heard of Steven Wilson. I hadn't even heard a lick of his music until we got to that show, and he ripped my face off. It was great. It was like, oh, yes, just like the album. It was amazing. And so we get backstage after the show, and we're talking to Adam, and he's just a great guy and easily approachable. We were talking about music and stuff, and all of a sudden my buddy Harry goes, "Did you get that CD of Kev's that I sent you?" I'm looking at Harry like, what are you talking about? I had no idea he had sent. And the reason he had one of my CDs was I would make all these demo CDs of my work that I was working on, and I'd let him hear it. I'd make a copy and say, "Hey, listen to this song. What do you think of that?" So he sent one of those to Adam. And then he says, "Have you thought about, maybe playing on a couple tracks on it?" And he goes, "Yeah, sure, I'd love to, man. We got the rest of the tour to finish out, and when I get back, I'll..." And of course, I've had so much smoke blown up my ass, in my career that I, should be floating above the stratosphere. That I thought very nice of him to say, "That's cool, but yeah, right." Not going to happen, I thought, Well, lo and behold, I get stems about 6 months later, and it blew my mind. It blew my mind. And it kind of went from there, because what happened was, now we have one of the world's foremost keyboard players. He's kind of known as the Moog specialist. He's to the Moog synthesizer today what Rick Wakeman, Keith Emerson were. Do you know of Emerson, Lake and Palmer?
I think my dad has mentioned about that. I know a little bit of it, but go ahead.
Okay, well, he's to the Moog what those guys were in the 70s and 80s. He's like the guy. And he did, the first thing I ever heard from him was the Moog solo in the center of 11th Hour. And I'm sitting here, I had everything rough mix up, and I'm listening, and all of a sudden it comes up in my speakers, and I went, I couldn't believe it. I was jumping up and down in my studio, high-fiving air, because no one was here. I had no one to hug and go, and it was just a moment, a moment to myself. And it was great. And he subsequently did the keyboards on Canvas. And I realized that this was now turning into an ongoing concern, in the sense that I had this little voice in the back of my head saying, "You're going to need to release this. I mean, come on, you're going to have to release this." And from what I told you at the beginning of this interview, I had a real aversion to putting my music out, because I felt that it was going to get stolen. I wasn't going to be able to sell it. People were just going to take it for free. And I wasn't willing to let that happen, so I wasn't going to do it. But I now knew that it was something I just had to bite the bullet and do. But I realized I was going to need help with the production, because having another set of ears and somebody with a different set of production knowledge is always beneficial. And there's a buddy of mine, also on the record, and I need to talk about him very much so, is John Van Hout. Now, John Van Hout owns a production company here in Spokane called Sound Logic. And John was gracious enough to to agree to come and work with me side by side right here as we started to produce the record. We realized we needed a guitar player. We needed somebody who could rise to that level, and I didn't really know anybody of that ilk. No offense to all the guitar players I know in Spokane. I love y'all. You're great, but this is prog, and this is Adam Holtzman. He played with Miles Davis. You got to bring it, you know. So
You can't compete, yeah. So yeah.
yeah, you can't be a gobbler. You know, you got to be somebody who knows how to do, you know, because that's Adam taught me that. He's like, no, man, Miles Davis told me one time, hey, man, when you solo, man, it's got to be a story. You're telling a story. It's got to be something that means something to you. And you got to have a really strong beginning that grabs people's attention, and then a compelling center where just, you know, you bring people into your emotion and your thing, and then you got to have a climactic ending, and that's how solos should be done. And he's right. That's the way. And there's so many people now who solo from the standpoint, I know this lick, and I know this lick, and I know this lick, you know, or I know this lick, and I know this lick, you know, and it's not tied in. You got to plug in, brother. Plug in. So we knew we had to have a great guitar player. And all of a sudden, John tells me one day, well, I know a guitar player who just got done doing a record. You're probably not going to know who these people are, but I'll tell you who they are. He just got done doing a record with John Anderson from Yes. He's the lead singer. And Jean-Luc Ponty, who was a violin player for Zappa, and also a very successful solo artist in the fusion world, jazz fusion. And he had just done a record with them, and he said, I can get a hold of him, which we did. His name's Michael Lewis. Fantastic guitar player, amazing guitar player. And we knew immediately upon the first time he did anything with what we were working on that he was going to fit the bill. And so we started working with him on the songs, and I had written a new song when I got back from England called Breaking August. And in that song, I had written a sort of a bastardized Baroque, medieval Baroque bit that is sprinkled throughout the track. And I had played all the harpsichord parts, right, to the best of my ability, which is, you know, I'm no Adam Holtzman. Trust me on this. Anyway, so I had played all that stuff. Well, I get a call from Mike one night, and he goes, "Hey, how would you like to have Oliver Wakeman replace all these harpsichord parts, man?" Now, if you know who Yes is, you know the history of Yes. Rick Wakeman was the keyboard player for Yes. Well, his son, he has two sons, Adam and Oliver Wakeman. I knew immediately who he was talking about. And, you know, he goes, do you want to have Oliver replace it? I go, well, let me think about it. Yes. You know, of course.
Allegedly, yes. So, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no pun intended. Anyway, so, you know, to my astonishment, I met the guy, total gentleman, amazing player. I am so, you know, blessed to have a guy of his caliber. Oh, and Adam, you know, now I have two of the world's finest keyboard players on my record. And I'm just this little drummer from Spangle, you know, nobody knows. Who's Kevin Dodson? I don't know, but it's Oliver Wakeman and Billy Sherwood. And so we knew that we had this thing going on. Now, Billy Sherwood came a little later. Again, I kind of owe a couple of beers to Michael Lewis, I think, here. We were working on another song that I had just written called Maud Frantic. And he calls me up again and he goes, you know, this song really needs Billy Sherwood to play bass on it. And I'm just telling you, you know. And I went, are you shitting me? Yeah, I want Billy Sherwood. Yes, of course. So he puts me in contact with Billy, and I just happened to be going on the Cruise to the Edge in 2022. And the whole point of me going on Cruise to the Edge was as basically a networking schmoozing thing where I could meet all these musicians, which I did. I met some of the world's finest musicians, many of them. And there's tons of story that go with that, but you don't have the time for that. So I'm going to just go to the quick here, which is basically, he said, Adam will be on the boat and, Billy will be on the boat and he's expecting to meet you. And sure enough, there he was. And I went up to him and, about ready to crap my pants, because I couldn't believe I was going to do this. So I went up and
one of those oh God moments, yeah.
It was like, can I talk to you? Anyway, I just went up and I figured I had to just, I think I told him something like, I really love your work on both sides of the glass, which is true because as a producer, he's one of my biggest influences. I think he got one of the best drum sounds I've ever heard on record. And I don't mean that just because he's on my record or because I was saying this before I ever knew the man or ever played with him. I thought on Open Your Eyes, the drum sound on that record is just incredible. Anyway, so I told him that, oh yeah, and I told him he goes, yeah, I was expecting it, and we talked for a few minutes and he agreed to do it. So that's how the three of them and Michael ended up on the record. Now, Jane Getter, a lot of people don't know, is Adam Holtzman's wife. And she has her own group, amazing band called Jane Getter Premonition. She's got a drummer in that band that I just love. I saw him on the boat. I wish I could remember his name right now, but I can't because I'm old. But their drummer reminded me of Billy Cobham. Now, you probably don't know who Billy Cobham is, but Billy Cobham to drummers, we know who he is. He really reminded me of that, and I told him so. I thought it was great. Anyway, Jane Getter also agreed to play on the record, play guitar. She plays on I'm No One. And so that's basically how it sort of, happened. Almost just what they say about, when one door opens, another opens, and you meet one person, then that gets you to another like Adam turned me on to Heil Mueller, the artist that did the work. Well, Heil Mueller does Porcupine Tree album covers and Steven Wilson album covers. I mean, he's world renowned as an artist for record album covers, and I got him on my record because I knew Adam. And then the same thing was true of Andy Van Dett. I love Andy Van Dett, man. He's the coolest dude. And I wished I could be, I've never been in the same room with him, but I know if we ever went out together, even though I don't drink anymore because they won't allow me to, we would have a blast because his personality and who he is. And he is a very well-known mastering engineer. He used to work with Bob Ludwig. And if you'd have to be an older guy like me. Bob Ludwig worked at Masterdisc in Manhattan, which is they mastered tons of the records you've heard your whole life. He was the mastering engineer, was Bob Ludwig. Well, Andy worked with Bob Ludwig. So I knew he knew what he was doing. Well, he cut the record, the vinyl. He did the mastering. And again, it's just like all these doors opening because this guy and he kind of turns you on to this guy and he kind of turns you on to this guy and, kind of drifts down. And I'm just so happy that these guys are on my record. It's just amazing to me. I still feel like, is this really happening? You know what I mean? Because I'm so used to being, working in obscurity and the song I'm No One, I don't like to tell people, like I said, about my lyrics, but that song sort of addresses that insecurity. Anyway, there you go.
There's a good story there too, especially when you deal into like the copywriting and that sort of legal stuff that goes on behind the scenes there too. So a lot of us are indie groups, and we're just pretty much one that just came up with a name, and then DistroKid and like some of those other distribution sites just seem to handle the rest. They just distribute your music out to all the streaming platforms and everything there too. So it's almost like, hey, we're good. I think we don't have to deal too much with the legal stuff.
You know what that is, Brian? That's the new model, right? because what people are selling anymore, and a lot of people don't understand this, is that they're not selling the toothpaste. They're selling the data of the people that are driven to buy the toothpaste. And, and this is why, and I got to be careful here, these megala corporations, the Googles, YouTubes of the world, they basically deal in data, okay, selling data. The criminal part of all of this is that would anybody go to Spotify or YouTube or anywhere if there wasn't content there for them to interact with? Who is driving all of these people who see all of the ads and buy the toothpaste? And, it's all the people that are coming to see Dream Theater or hopefully the Madrigal Project, right? Well, here's the thing. They're collecting all of the analyticals. They're getting all the data. Your email address, your name, all of that stuff. Okay, and and so we live in a world now where I'm the guy that drives them to the site. They make I think last year $3.5 billion. Or was it $13.5 billion, of which we get 0.0000015% of a penny per time that it's played. I'm going to put my kids through college on that kind of money. Essentially, I'm avoiding calling them what they are. I mean, a lot of artists feel like if we didn't have them, we would have no platform, and they're probably right. But a lot of younger bands, like the one you just talked to, are probably of the mindset, that just like I was when I was 31 and signed a bad deal, right? Is it just put us out there? We want, and in some of the cover bands I played in, I used to have a joke saying that I would tell everyone and say, well, the agents make all the money, but we get all the glory. When you're 25, 30, 35, that matters. And they know it. And they take advantage of that. And the fact that most musicians are not business savvy. They just aren't, as a general rule. And they know that. And they take advantage of it, Yeah, sure. Give us your music. We'll put it out there. We'll put ads attached to it. We'll make all this money, and you'll get, here, kid. Here, kid, have a couple pennies. See you later,
A little too satisfaction, yeah. So I can say what. But yeah, it is mostly a cop and complain. And it's also what I think, to a certain extent, I think that's what causes some musicians just resign. It's I can't do this anymore. This is not getting anywhere. Again, maybe the views, that sort of stuff, let alone the financial, even though in many of the interviews they would say the financial side of it's not the reason they want to do music. So,
and that's in the beginning, when you're 20, when you're 25, when you start having kids and mortgages and car payments and things like that, that whole song goes away and they start singing a new song. How come I'm not getting paid for what I do? And I know from having a background in audio production for film and television that, it wasn't until I got into that I realized that the only place I was going to make any real money was on the back end, was on royalties. Now, if you're dealing with Warner Brothers, NBC, CBS, ABC, Telemundo, whoever, you don't get any of that publishing. They own the publishing in perpetuity throughout the universe forever and ever and ever and ever. Which in some ways is bad, especially for, if you're a post-production house or a trailer, what they call a post-trailer house that creates which is what I do or did mostly, was trailer music. And network promos, like 2.5, the music that plays in the background of an ad for 2.5 Men, and you can't even really hear what's playing back there. The thing about the Madrigal Project that's funny is There's millions of people out there that have heard my work. They just don't know it. They just don't know it, you know?
Yeah.
But I
Sad.
found out a long time ago that was the game because, you know, as far as going out and playing live, they're still paying, you know, most bands, they're, well, in LA, it's the pay to play thing. You know, it's like, here, I'll rent you my stage. I'm not going to do any promo. You go pay for all your promo. You print up the tickets. You bring all the people in here and I'll let you use my stage. And you can sell your swag and sell your CDs. And, you know, it's the business model that has been the and we're getting, I don't want this whole interview to be a negative vibe, but I mean, the whole thing is set up to, for lack of a better way to put it, screw the artist. It's just been set up like that even before the digital age. And, you know, record deals were really just loans from a bank. You know, it was, people thought, oh, I've got a record deal. Yeah, we're going to give you $250,000, but you're going to pay every penny of it back. And by the way, part of the way you're going to pay it back is by selling records. And part of the way you're going to sell records is making videos. But by the way, we're not paying for the video. You're going to pay for the video. It's kind of like a student school loan, right? You get out of school, I'm ready to become a dentist and buy a house as soon as I get out from underneath this oppressive debt that's been laid on me. And these poor kids now are starting out life like my daughter, who, you know, I'm very proud of my daughter. She's research scientist and engineer too at the Semple Lab on the University of Washington campus. She works with a particle collider, particle collider called Van der Graaf. By the way, for all you progressive rock fans out there, the name of the thing is Van der Graaf. Interestingly enough. And she's kind of heading up the whole thing. But the truth is, even though she's doing pretty well in Seattle with what she does, she's got heavy student loan debt, you know, and she's still trying to pay that off. And in most of the kids' minds nowadays, it's, am I ever going to be able to get a home? Am I ever going to be able to own a home? You know, and I feel horrible for them. I feel sorry for them, you know, because it's not fair. They, you know, anyway, we could get off onto a whole nother tangent on that one, but yeah, so I don't want to make it sound like everything's doom and gloom and horrible, you know. You know, the process of creating music for me is a spiritual one, a magical one. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. And the only way I can get that fix is to do it. And so you just have to find ways that if you're going to do it, try to find ways that, and I'll go one more thing on that subject, try to find ways to monetize what you do. And one of the ways you can do that is to, what we used to deal with, it was called artist-driven promos. And what that was original music by the artist. And you might take the vocal out. You might only have a rhythm track. You might have the bass, drums, and the guitar, only no keys, or maybe just the key, whatever. There were mix outs. And that can be used in show. It can be used in a film. It can be used in an ad. And you're going to generate royalties. And if you're the writer of the song, you can collect on that, right? If you're not the writer of the song, it's like the Moody Blues still being out touring. And you know why? Because they got musicians in their band who didn't write the song. And the only way they're going to make money and pay their mortgage and put their kid through school is to go play gigs at the local casino. You know? You know, and the writers are like, if they have a heart, like most of them do, Justin Hayward, who wrote most of the songs, you know, it's like, okay, well, I'm doing pretty well and my guys are struggling, so I'm going to go out and, you know, sell swag and t-shirts because they don't make any money on the concert. See, it's a system, and this whole thing has turned into a big negative thing, but it's really unfair. And I wished I had the answers. I wish I could tell you how we could, as a collective or as a, you know, as artists, do something about it. The only way I know to do anything about it is try to get your stuff placed in ads, in promos, in trailer music, in anything like that. And you have a chance of making a real living out of it. But going and playing at the local Thrill Grill, for $50, I mean, $50. Musicians were making more than $50 in 1950. It's 2024, and it's not really the club owner's fault, They're not making enough money to be able to pay the bands what they should be getting paid, right? So it's a catch-22 kind of. Anyway, let's get on to something positive, Brian. What do you say? Let's make people happy. It's all, I saw that Kevin Dodson guy was all gloom and doom, man. I'm going to buy his record.
I mean, we're already 20 minutes into it here, too. So, I mean, like, the short attention span these days, too. I think most people will stop after about 5 minutes. So
that is so true, my friend. And part of the reason musicians nowadays are having such a struggle, too, is they can't stay concentrated and learn the business. Anyway.
Long story short. So, yeah.
I'm trying to make them short answers, but, dude, there are no short answers in this story. And it's been very frustrating to me because I have these people want to interview me. Progsphere sent me a written interview, and I wrote them back War and Peace. I mean, it's like the Bible. It's like, we're gonna have to edit this down a little bit, Kevin. And I'm like, yeah,
Oh yeah. So yeah.
I mean,
it's all good. It's all good.
You'll probably have to edit, just like you're gonna have to edit this video, because you're gonna go, good Lord, we only got through 4 questions. Or something like that.
We're already an hour into this thing. Yeah. So. That's all good, though, too. But actually, the next question here kind of delves into the hard topic of COVID right here. So I guess, how bad was COVID for you, family-wise, and then how bad was it music-wise?
COVID. At the time that COVID hit, I was in another cover band that I was the leader of called Smash Hit Carnival, not to be confused with Smash Shit Carnival, which is what people would say. Or if you were my other buddy, we were called Shithouse Circus. No, anyway.
Just throw the S in front of it, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, this cover band, and we had a client who, the greatest guy in the world, Jack Locker, is an amazing man. And he happened to have a business called Tank Max, where he had it was like a shop, right, where they built and repaired tanker truck parts and stuff. He's one of the biggest tanker trucker guys, that carry the milk and the fuel and Anyway, so he had this place, shop, and he goes, Kev, I'm moving the business to another place, and I still have a 5-year lease on this building. If you guys want to move your band in there. I was like, oh my God. So we moved the band in there. We turned it into basically a video and an audio studio, essentially. And a lot of bands during COVID, were doing these online shows, and we did the same thing. It was SHC Live in the Tank. We called it the Tank because it was Tank Max, and it was anyway. And we were plummeted into obscurity within a matter of weeks. I mean, we didn't know anything about how to catch the algorithms, how to do. I mean, we were just ignorant to the whole thing. But that's what we were doing during COVID. And I was. I already had my tickets to go on the cruise to the Edge and everything. And it was an upheaval, because I had, as it was my cover band, I'd spent a lot of time, a lot of energy on it. But I was realizing more and more and more that I couldn't do both. I couldn't do this record on the level that I knew I had to do it, and also be the leader, booker, guy in this stupid cover band. And so I put the band on ice right before I went on the cruise to the Edge. And but COVID had a huge effect on me, and this is a hard thing to talk about because I don't want to politicize things, and I don't want to talk about that stuff. It's very, very controversial, especially now. And but I felt that a lot of the politics around it, and some of the disinformation and things that were flying around about that, because I had a couple of friends die from that disease, and I knew it wasn't a hoax, and I knew it wasn't to be trifled with, and I'm the type of guy that self-educates. If there's something that needs to be, learned, you got to dig under the hood and get down into the brass tacks. And a lot of people don't realize that, they didn't come up with the vaccine overnight. COVID had been around for years, and they had been developing a vaccine for it in anticipation of a pandemic that they anticipated was going to happen eventually. Well, it happened. And all they did was fast track the vaccine so that they could try to battle, which is what they're supposed to do. They're the Center for Disease Control. It's kind of their job, right? And so anyway, I have a lot of friends that were vaxxed, and see, it's hard not to get into it, right? They were. Let me just say, there was a lot of pain and suffering associated with COVID, and a lot of it was avoidable. A lot of it did not have to happen. And I've written songs about it, but have been reticent to put them out because, again, the minute you tell people the truth, my truth or whatever, nowadays there's no such thing. It could be anything. But anyway, it's something I try to avoid getting too deep into unless I'm on a one-on-one basis. In public, it's not a good idea. I'm not a politician. I'm not an expert. I'm not somebody who should be listened to in any way, shape, or form about what my beliefs are in terms of that. But I have very strong beliefs in it. I have very strong feelings about it. But COVID was a nasty, horrible thing. And it's, what can you say about that, But anyway, we were doing this tank live shows, and we never really did anything with that. And then I folded the group. We moved out of the tank, and I went on the cruise to the edge. And then I met Billy, and then we just, and here you and I are. So there you go.
Yep. It's funny how that works out too. So that's good to hear. On a serious note, I'm very sorry for your loss right there. So loss is, I should say.
Yes, and I had friends who also had a lot, and mine were friends that died, but there are other people I know, friends of mine, who had parents and siblings and loved ones and friends die from it, and so it's not, I just didn't think it was something to be trifled with, and there's a certain amount of arrogance, I would say, in perpetrating something information to people that you just quantify as being the truth. This is the truth. Well, is it?
The whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. So yeah.
Who's God, right? Which God? Anyway, we're getting into that. Now we don't want to get into politics and religion because you won't be able to put this out. I'm just kidding.
I know. Okay. But anyway.
We'll be cutting that out, Kevin.
It's like, whoa, we got to censor that out too, so it's all good. And I guess, did you have any pressures with COVID? I guess, were you and your family okay?
Yeah, we were, and this is another thing that I don't really, it's kind of something I've vacillated back and forth on whether I should talk about it very much, but because I don't want people to think that in any way, I'm trying to tug at your sympathy strings, or something, because, I got a handle, don't worry about it. But I have a special needs daughter. I have a daughter that's 24/7 care. She lives in home with us. I'm a caregiver, 3, sometimes 4 days a week. She's She's 24/7 care. She has Rett syndrome, RETT. Anyway, and so when COVID hit the scene, obviously I had very, very, very deep concerns as to how that would. We were finding out how it affected a normally healthy person. How would it affect my daughter if she were to get it, right? So we followed the guidelines. We followed the science. I mean, that's what we did. And we subsequently got vaccinated. Now, my wife never had it. My daughter never had it, but I got it. But I only got it. I got it twice, actually. But the symptoms were almost like a cold, like nothing, So the vax did its job in keeping it from being, and I'm old. It could have been, respirator time, and we wouldn't be talking right now. But I came through it just fine, and so we did get through it, to the other end, and thank you, that's where I'm at with that.
So we thank the man upstairs for that. So, all right.
That?
As I thank the man upstairs for that. So
yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
But in all seriousness, good to see you and your family are doing well there. So good to have you all for the ride here. And congratulations on the release of your album.
Thank you.
Today or yesterday, actually.
It was yesterday. And just to kind of let the viewers know, I have been inundated with, most, like 85%, glowing, wonderful, and I can't answer them all. I mean, I'm one guy, and like I'm sitting here watching them populate over here, thinking when we're done here, I'll be here for the next 6 hours. But I just want everybody to know that I am humbled and appreciative. Just understand if it takes a little while for me to get back to you, I'm getting kind of inundated, but I also want everyone to know that, I'm so thankful and appreciative of the wonderful things people are saying about the record. We just need it to translate into some sales. I mean, it's great that you can go listen to my record on Spotify. That's making a lot of money for Spotify. It ain't doing me any good. It ain't doing me any favors, So, and that sounds like begging, and you might have to cut this out, but essentially what I'm saying is, if you like this record, if you love this record, if it touches you, first of all, that's what it's all about. And I'm honored to have been able to give someone that experience. But the only way I'm going to be able to do the next record is if more people buy the record, and so I beseech you, buy the record for the love of God, for the love of all that's good and holy.
Yeah, me too. Well, congratulations on listening too. So I did give you a listen. So I gave you a follow on Spotify. So it's all good.
Oh, love you. I mean, I don't know you.
Not that deep sort of love. The brotherly sort of love. I don't
love you in a Brokeback Mountain kind of way. Just as a friend.
I wasn't thinking that far. I was just thinking the brotherly love. That'll deal. High five all around. That'll deal. So I guess it's your main job. I guess you actually work as a producer, and I guess also do stuff in the music scene, and maybe this can tie in with like the gear that you have.
I'm more of an independent composer I haven't been doing as much because I've concentrated most of my energies on the record. I've done a few things in audio production, and I am an in-home caregiver. I mean, I don't mind letting people know, so what I do now is I caregive for my daughter, which gives me not only a little bit of a paycheck, but it also gives me great insurance. And then I still have royalties coming in from a lot of the television work and film work that I've done. and then I'm not playing live anymore right now, which I used to do a lot more, to make some extra money. But now it's pretty much just caregiving, royalties, and then I spend the rest of my time on the Madrigal vision. And so that's what I do. That's my job now. The job. Yeah. I'm trying to get to the point where my job is to be Kevin Dodson every day. That's what I'd like. I'd like to experience what it's like to be one of those guys. If you're Steve Gadd, what's your job? My job is to be one of the finest drummers in the world. So when I get up in the morning, my job is to be Steve Gadd. I can go into a rehearsal studio and rehearse drums for 8 hours solid. I don't have that kind of luxury at all. I hope to get there someday. Maybe by the time I'm 75, Brian, I'll, hey, let's do another progger. What do you say?
Got to keep up, yeah. All right. And actually, what kind of gear do you have right there? Because I'm assuming this is where the magic happens for the whole Madrigal project.
This is, a project studio. I wouldn't call it a major. It's not like a studio facility that has big recording rooms. It's one of my deficits that I have here at this studio is that in the other room is the tracking room. I have like 3 drum kits set up in there and some other keyboards and stuff set up in there. But the ceilings are kind of low, and so when I'm recording drums, it's difficult to catch air. It's difficult to get the overhead microphones up high enough. So I have this special way that I'm doing that, which someday maybe I'd be able to show your readers how I mic the kit and what I do with the kit. But in here, it's pretty much what I would call consumer grade equipment. I wish I could tell you that I had a $12,000 U80, Neumann U87. I don't. I have. Okay, let's talk about the Studio Live 32SX mixer over here, which you can kind of see. What this is essentially, for me anyway, is a kind of a glorified interface in the sense that when I'm recording drums, I have to have multiple tracks that can come in. I have to have, kicks. I use 3 kick drum mics, snare, toms, hi-hat, overhead, all of that. Well, I have to have multiple inputs for that. And in most cases, most interfaces are like, 8 channel. I think they're making bigger ones now, but I don't know. But I would have had to buy 2 of them to have even 16 tracks, right? Well, this is 32 tracks, okay? And I can record multiple tracks at the same time. So as far as using any of the onboard effects or compressors or any of that, not so much. I do pretty much all of that in the box, as they say. I use, I'm a Cubase guy. I work on Cubase, and I have, myriad of plugins. And the keyboard that's in front of me here, is my complete 88 key keyboard that I do most of the keyboard work on. Over there in the corner is my acoustic and my electric, which you can't see. Got an electronic kit over there. This PreSonus, this is the fader port, which I use for to control the virtual mixer on Cubase, right? Which I don't do with this. So this slaves to that. So anyway, and I recorded the album in here. And what was very important to me was some of the things that I don't hear in records today, and that are common things that are done. I don't want to put anybody down. I love everybody's music. I love everybody, but there is, in my humble opinion, a lot of music now fails to reach a level of separation and clarity, especially in the high end, because most people push too much, you know, usually from about 2K up to 7K is just, you know, uh, and well, for instance, okay, let's talk about drum production. How many drums do you hear out there that have on the snare drum?
I mean, kind of like a chain sort of thing, or maybe it gets like a tin can.
Yeah, well, they just know they just have a lot of verb. Like they've got, maybe a third, I don't know.
But then regardless, it's not really a whole lot. But I guess what are we kind of getting at?
Well, what I'm saying is that you'll hear verb. In the case of having a big room, I'd be able to have natural air. So I do have to use a bit of verb. What I use is room, but for the most part, the drums on 11th hour are dry. I didn't use, a whole lot of, especially reverb, because the thing of it is that I and I tend to be a little more liberal with my overheads than the average producer would be. Why? Because I get tired of hearing records where it's like the drums are in another time zone, and they're you can't hear the cymbals, you don't hear the hi-hat, you kind of do. They're sort of in there if you listen really, really hard, but a lot of records nowadays, the drums are almost like an afterthought, it seems like. They're just way back. And, if there's guitars in it, they're in your face. If it's metal, a lot of triggers are used on the drums. And so they're samples, that you're hearing. And which has an effect on the way a drummer's feel is actually interpreted through the speaker, production-wise. I mean, if you're using a sampled kick drum or a sampled snare, there's a certain amount of velocity normalization or something. I don't know what you would call it, actually. It just is not like standing next to a drummer and hearing the drum kit. If you were standing next to a drum kit in a live situation, you'd be like, whoa, cymbals.
Like, oh, my ears, that whole deal. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I've killed more than one guitar player and bass player's hearing with high-end frequency.
Gotta protect them ears, yeah. So,
careful, because cymbals and high-end can be frequency eaters, where if you've got too much happening in that upper range, in terms of overheads and stuff, that can be a difficult. So it's a balancing act, right? It's a way of making the drum kit sound natural. That is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying for the drums to not sound like processed drums. I like the sound of a drum kit. I want to hear the drums. And I don't want to hear electronic drums unless that's what I'm trying to go for. If I want to use, I've never used electronic drums supplemental to real drums, to acoustic drums. I've always treated electronic drums as a means to play sounds that you can't get on a drum set. Why would you want to do that? It's always, since the 80s, I've been like that. I've been like, why would you want to, have a fake, for lack of a better way, or a sampled snare drum? What? I want to hear a snare. If I want to hear a snare drum, I want to hear a snare drum. I don't want to hear an Ocean Way snare drum or a Superior Drummer snare drum or I know what they sound like. So like okay. I can listen to a record and immediately tell you if it's really a drummer playing or if it's a processed drums or programmed drums. I can tell you right away. because I know the sound so well. Having worked, my claim to fame in production was I did a series called Percussive Action, which was heavy drum oriented tracks that were used for like action sequences in films. You know, when you hear the drums are happening, you know, and lots of hits and sweeps and sound design happening in it. And I did a series that did pretty well called Percussive Action. And through that, I used a lot of electronic drums because in that world, in production for film and television, you know, you're not so much putting your personal taste involved. It's more about what needs to be for the client or for what you're trying to replicate. If like a client says, well, I want it to sound like Dead Mouse, you know, well, you're not going to use a real drum kit for Dead Mouse, right? No. So, but
Dead Mouse.
Dead Mouse, I call them Dead Mouse, but they,
yeah.
you know, but they used electronic drums, and as in the doings of that, I've heard pretty much every electronic drum you can imagine. Many times I've heard it. So when I hear it on a recording, I know what it is. I can almost tell you what it is. Oh, that's you know, whatever. And I'm getting overladen on some of this, or too tedious with you, I guess, on the aspects of that. But as a drummer, the simple way to put it is, if I want to hear drums, I want to hear drums. If I want to hear, you know, electronic drums or you know, sample drums or replicated drums, I use them. I'm not saying I'm against them. They're on my record. When you hear the song A Question of Weight and Matter, in the section in the middle section, there's a breakdown, and if you watch the video, I'm over at the electronic kit for that one drum lick in the middle, and then it cuts over here to my machine, complete machine, me going right. So I wanted that. That was the sound I wanted there, but not for the whole song. You know? Just that one little thing. Just that one.
Just a little bit into it, yeah.
Just a little bit, just to let people know I know what they are. I've used them. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm guilty of it too. I have used Superior Drummer because I use an electronic set. And fortunately, I live in a house right here. Unfortunately, you can't really make too much noise. Otherwise, I think your neighbors are not going to like you.
Oh, totally. You know, Brian, I'm not saying I hate them and they're wrong, or that you shouldn't. And actually, as a practice instrument, they're great. But I can tell you, a pad, no matter how well, even if it's the highest end Roland pad, you know, mesh pad or whatever, they still don't quite have the feel, you know, of real drums. So you have to have a different technique when you play an electronic kit versus playing a real kit. There's a completely, in my world anyway, it's a completely different thing. But no, I'm not down on them. I'm not saying, you know, they are the mark of the beast. You know, I'm not saying that. Yes, no, not saying that. I'm saying that for me, the simplest way to put it is, I need a real drum sound, I'm going to use real drums. If I want, you know, processed, sampled type approach, I'll use them. So I'm not against them. I use them. Next.
Right, fair enough. Yeah. Actually, you think maybe that could tie into some of the advice you'd give to maybe drummers and other musicians that you'd give to them?
Well, yeah, become a doctor.
Go to a lawyer. Yeah.
Become a lawyer or a doctor.
Lawyer, doctor, yeah.
Well,
I think that anyway, don't tell them that you're Jewish, though.
Do espouse to the theory, or the you know, the idea that we should not be doing this type of art with the main impetus being to make money. I agree with that. It should not be. If you want to do that, you better start a boy band or go see if you can, you know, work for Taylor Swift or something, you know, um, uh, if you want to make, but it's not impossible to make money in this field, even now. And I would say, if you go back to the very beginning of what we were talking about in the beginning, about being able to generate royalties, being able to do maybe artist-driven, production music that can be like used for, they call it library production music, which is like just various tracks in various genres, various styles that editors at the network level or in a film can grab off. They call it grabbing it off the wall. I go to the wall, I grab this cut of music. It's just a cut of music that this place made. But once your music gets used in any of that, you generate royalties. So there's ways to make money in it. I think the biggest advice is that, and you hear this all the time. It's almost cliche, but follow your inner instinct and your inner voice. Don't try to be like everything else. There's too much of a contributing to the sameness of everything. I don't think that there's a record, and I hope people don't think this sounds egotistical, but I don't think there's a record out there that sounds like 11th Hour. In a lot of ways, and that's intentional. And I think that younger players, well, two things. Stay real to yourself. And stop trying to make it an Olympic sport. I don't really give a shit if you can play, Flight of the Bumblebees on your kick drums. I really don't care. What's musical about it? If you can make that and use it in a musical manner, cool. And I know that it's used a lot in metal, and that's fine. But I've always had an aversion, to who's got the fastest snare drum, who's got the fastest feet, it's not an Olympic sport, man. It's art. I'm not the best drummer on the planet, and I never will be. Okay? But I do the best Kevin Dodson that's out there. It's an individual thing. Be individual. Listen to your inner voice. Don't follow the pack, and don't get caught up in that whole, I went to Berkeley, so now I'm going to show you every lick I can, and I'm going to put a lick, I'm going to overplay every song. No, anyway, it's not about that. Like, if you listen to all of the prog records that I love so much, and I have a couple of them up here on the wall as inspiration. One in particular is Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. Does Nick Mason do any double bass kick drum ostinatos in Dark Side of the Moon? Does he play any really difficult technical drum licks? No. But his feel, and he knew what not to play, and he played what was perfect for that record. He wasn't about showboating and saying, look at me. They were a band that were after, it's like 10cc. Listen to those guys. I just listened to sheet music the other day by 10cc, a record made 50 years ago in 1974. The production is better. It's amazing. It's like it could have been put out yesterday, and the clever songwriting and the clever, brilliant lyrics and everything. But not once in there do you get the feeling that someone's trying to show you how fast of a lick they can play on their guitar. I think it's gotten out of hand. I'm not saying there's not a place for it. There obviously is. There's a reason to have that kind of technical facility. Of course, you want to have it. Great to have those tools. It's how you apply them that makes all the difference in the world. Half of my favorite albums, I could play every song on them. Not because I'm a great drummer or anything, but because, you know, they weren't trying, they were going for atmosphere and vibe and groove and feeling and being emotive and being, you know, real, being about the everyone making something. It's not about me, it's about a collective. It's about making something like Genesis. Early Genesis floored me because they were masters at creating atmosphere. You know, like you were transported into another place, another world, you know, just through a sonic experience. I mean, and 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 it's just so clever and creative and beautiful, you know, just beautiful. And so I hope I'm not coming off wrong to a lot of younger players. I'm not saying don't get great at your instrument. I'm not saying don't get. It's like I love Terry Bozzio for this. I once went to a clinic and I had a tape that I worked on for years where he talked about the ostinato. Okay, ostinato with kick drums. Like he would set up Swiss triplets with your kick drums, you know, right? Swiss triplets is what they're called. You get that going to where it's totally, you almost don't even have to think about it. You know, it's just natural. You can do it while you're eating soup, right? Then what he would say is he'd say, now take your left hand and play the first quarter note of bar one. So, and 4-bar phrases. Now, here's where it gets tricky. And he was really good at it. I'm not going to try to do it for you right now because a 30-second note's really hard to interpret, especially over this. But displace that now by a 30-second note, now by a 16th note, now by an 8th note. Now you're on 2, right? So now you're going 1, 2, blah, 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 2, blah, right? Because you've done every permutation of that you could possibly do. And what's the point of it? And this is what made it beautiful, is that Terry would say, the point of it is to give yourself the facility to be able to play any phrase, okay, within that metric, within that time signature, within that tempo, because you've found at every single place that you can place that, and then you do the same thing with your right hand, and then you switch, and now instead of starting with the right kick drum on your Swiss triplets, now start with the left one, right? So, I mean, all he was talking about was, you know, get to where you have it in your tool belt, and you can pull it out, so that if you imagine something, you have the facility to be able to do it, because you've practiced, you know, every permutation of every limb that you can over that particular, and we're talking about ostinatos now, which is a repeated phrase over and over again, and then played over, right? You play over them. Anyway, I just start getting into all kinds of stuff for you, don't I? Anyway, so I always thought Terry Bozzio had the right idea. It wasn't about showing that he could do all that in every performance that he did. It was about having it at his facility, having it ready whenever he needed it. And I thought that was brilliant. That's the way to do it. Have it in your tool belt, pull it out when you need it, you know, but don't flaunt it just because you can, you know, because I learned a long time ago as a drummer too, in an ensemble, the first thing what do you think the first thing you should listen to in a band, in an ensemble collective? What do you think as a drummer, you know, what do you think is the first thing you should be cognizant of?
Was that maybe more the beat? But then again, I'm self-taught when it came to drumming here too. So unfortunately, I'm not that very well educated into it. I improvise. That's what I do.
No, so am I too. Well, the first thing I learned is you got to listen to the vocalist. Because if you set a tempo that's either too fast or too slow, that doesn't make it comfortable for the singer to sing, you're not doing your job. I mean, so I will listen to the singer, and if I feel like I'm making him rush or I'm making him drag, I don't adjust the tempo immediately. Like, I do it slowly so that it's almost imperceptible. But I make sure that I'm at the right tempo for the vocalist. That's number one. Number two, you should always be in tandem and in lockstep with the bass guitar. Everything else after that is color, really. You know, it's just color and nuance and who am I to teach anybody? I'm sitting here trying to teach somebody something. That's how I look at it. Let me put it that way. You know.
No, you would be right. Times when I was like studying songs, for instance, because I do a lot of drum covers on my YouTube channel.
Right.
It was I was mainly listening to see like what instrument was doing what, and then it was like, let's see, if a guitar player is doing this, that means okay, we're jumping into this part next. So it's best to know if it's a key change, because sometimes in metal we like to experiment when it comes to speed. So I'd say definitely listening to music a good few times, as well as like getting the feel for it down. I would say, yeah, I can see your point on that. So
yeah, it's well, and I mean, it's one thing to play to a pre-recorded, you know, when you're playing to a recording, or even in the studio, because it's the same thing. A lot of times you'll be working with a click. Now, I had the benefit of starting to work with clicks way back in the 90s when I was a session drummer, and I became so comfortable with the click that it didn't. Well, let me put it. Here's the best way to put it. In my cover band, Smash It Carnival, we use sequences. Okay, guys, we use tracks. Everybody does. Get over it.
anyway,
we used tracks because there were some parts we only had so many players in the band, and my belief was if the song had strings in it, you shouldn't probably do, unless you're doing your own interpretation of it, you shouldn't probably try to be replicating Live and Let Die if you don't have strings and brass. What are you doing? You know, it's not going to sound like Live and Let Die, is it? Anyway, so when we use sequences in that band, I would have a click and I would run it almost imperceptible in my headphones. I mean, I could hear it, right? But I was very cognizant of the idea. I don't want to be playing to the click. I don't want to be so, I got to be on the click, you know. You want to play to the music. You want to play to the song, right? So I didn't really, the click was always ran a little low, and so I could hear it, but I'd always know if I was wavering too far off the click if I could hear it really well. Then I go, oh, I'm kind of getting, I'm drifting, you know. And so I would do that, but the other thing about it was that there's three places you can play on a click, and on the beat, actually. You can play dead center of the beat, which a lot of people call American drummers play dead center on the beat. English players play just a little bit behind, just a fraction of behind that beat, right? And some, if you're trying to create incitement in a chorus, for instance, you might want to play on top of the beat a little bit, just a little ahead of it. Not rushing it, but just a little ahead of it. And so I learned that very early on, that there's about three places you can play to the click, you know, dead on, a little behind, or a little ahead. And in my case, the way I did sequences, I didn't do sequences to the grid. You know, I didn't go, okay, this song is about 133 beats per minute, so I'll just sequence the whole song at 133 beats per minute, which would make it sound very mechanical, right? Because there is no drummer, I don't care who it is, who can play perfect time. It's impossible. We're humans. It's impossible. So what I would do is I would take, if we were doing a song by Styx or something, I would take the song and I would strip it into Cubase, and I have this software. Well, it's actually in Cubase. It's called tempo detection, and you analyze the waveform, and it gives you a tempo map. So all of my clicks live with the band, none of them were straight 133 beats per minute. They were doing this, ebbing and flowing, because you know what I had? I had the actual time that the drummer played back in 1970 before they even knew what a click was. A click was something that you edited off the tape. They didn't know anything about click track. So they'd be, you know, you'd be surprised. You'd be really surprised at tempos. But that's what made that music of the 70s have life and feel and breathe. And, you know, it was a real thing. And so I would often tell people, I'd have drummer friends that say, "Hey man, I'll fill in for you if you ever." I'd say, "Well, okay, but I think you might have a little bit of trouble," because I had to learn myself where the clicks were going to go. I would know where they'd slow down quite a bit or where they'd speed up. And
Get me bite off more than you want to chew. Yeah.
right, so I was anticipatory of it. But if some drummer sitting there cold, you know, cold call on the thing, you know, they're going to be like pulling their hair out because they're going to get off the click a lot because it's going to be all over the place. So that's how I did it. And because I felt that it made songs, even though we had tracks, sound more real. They had more feel. They sounded more like, you know, players playing together rather than, you know, playing to a click. So, you know, anyway.
Just one of those days, yeah. So,
Nice.
that's good. All right. And just real quick, I guess, what sort of challenges do you face these days? I guess being a musician, I guess also a producer as well.
What challenges do I? You mean as a producer, or?
I guess both, really, when you think about it. Well, I know one ties in with the other, but I guess they try to get the old guys together for the music too. So I wonder if that's probably it.
I think one of the most difficult things as a player kind of goes back to what I said before about not being able to spend 8 hours in a rehearsal room practicing my double stroke rolls and stuff, right? I don't have the luxury of that. And so for me, you know, practicing my instrument, making time for that and being able to do that is very, very difficult for me. I mean, I find myself practicing stuff, patterns and stuff when I'm feeding my daughter. You know, I'll be sitting there messing around kick drum thing or an idea like, you know, think, oh, okay, okay. No, anyway, I digress. That's probably one of the hard things is that I don't get the opportunity to practice my instrument as much as I would like to. I wished I could. From a production standpoint, the limitations are simply, like I said before, gear. I mean, this isn't bad gear. I made it sound pretty good, but I would love to have, you know, like I said, a Neumann U87, they're $12,000 for one microphone. I don't have that kind of money. I don't have a Trident mixer board, right? I don't actually have a Atari 2-track tape machine that I can also use if I want to record the bass and drums on analog tape, or if, you know, my limitations are just money and gear. I hope this record takes me to a place where Steven Wilson says, "Hey, how would you like to come over to my house?" And, you know, or how'd you like to go into a nice studio, a big one, you know, and we'll make it right. You know, that would be fantastic, because I know how to work in a bigger studio. I did for years, but this is a project studio, like I said. So that's probably the biggest, you know, setback for me, is that, you know, I just don't have the gear that, you know, maybe, you know, that a bigger studio would have, right? A bigger, quote unquote, commercial studio, if those still exist. In other words, you're not walking in here and walking into Trident, or walking into Morgan Studios in the UK, or you're not walking into Capitol Records. I mean, that's not here, right? That's not. I don't have that, and I wish I did. But I've learned through osmosis how to use the tools I have to the best, for me anyway, and hopefully, I'm not saying I totally succeeded all the time, but I did the best I could, with the limitations I have. So I would say those are probably, gear is a limitation as a producer, as a musician, the practice time. But I'd say also, going back to what I talked about at the very beginning of this interview about, the difficulty in actually monetizing your intellectual property, being able to actually make a living. My goal with 11th Hour is very simple. First of all, fame and rock stardom said bye-bye to me years ago. So I have no interest in that. What I'd like to have happen is be able to garner an audience of people who like the music and want to support it enough to where I could make enough money on this record that it pays for itself. Or another way of looking at it is that it pays for the next record, right? I just want to open up what would you call it? I just want to have an audience of people who appreciate my work enough to purchase it and to support it so that I can do the next record, because for me, I love the work. I want to do the work. As far as the even doing interviews like this is a foreign thing for me, because it's like, let's be honest, I'm 65 years old, man. I don't, I want to go out and tour. I'm trying to put a band together to go play this music right now, and I would do that. I still physically and mentally am capable to do that. Now, whether I will be in 5 or 10 years, I don't know. God willing, I will. But, yeah, I mean, my motivations for doing this are strictly, art, a personal outlet because lyrics mean a lot to me. Lyrics are a big part of what I do. And my favorite lyricist, if you're out there, Peter, love you, brother, Peter Hamill, from a band called Von der Graaf Generator. You probably don't know about them, but he also has a very prolific solo career. I mean, this guy's got like about 640 albums out or something. I don't even know how many albums the guy's got out. It's like, but his lyrics, this is a guy who can take very high concept subject matter, intricate technical subject matter, and write eloquent, beautiful, descriptive, wonderful, read between the line, great lyrics. His lyrics, to me, him and Peter Gabriel and Ian Anderson, I just love the lyrical content is very important to me. So what I'm trying to say is, my impetus and purpose for doing this is that I have this in me, and I have to get it out of me. It's like breathing. Okay, it's like if I don't get it out of me, they're going to put me in a padded cell somewhere because I will go crazy. And I have definite things I want to express, and I haven't got there yet. I haven't done my Dark Side of the Moon or Lamb Lays Down, or I haven't done that yet. I got a lot of work to do, Brian. I got a lot of work to do, man, to get anywhere where, but the whole idea of it is like I say, I just want to create an audience that will be with me, and that appreciate the music enough to support it, to buy it, which is why I said earlier about, if you like the music, it's great. Can you please buy it? Because it's not a greed thing. It's so that the album can pay for itself. And so I have enough money to do the next record, And if the art was to pay for itself, art for art's sake, bueno, perfect, done. You know what I mean? And if I get to tour, would be another bucket list thing. Well, I'd love to tour the world and play this music, but I got to find the right players. And I live in Spokane, Washington. We're pretty close to, Spangle, where I come from, which is a wheat farming community up there in the Palouse. Up in there, you got Rosalia and Fairfield and Clayton, and all those places. Spangle, And I'm a member of the Pea Growers Association. I used to cruise the 4-H for babes on a Saturday night. We used to throw shit off the bridge. That was what we did for fun.
Back in the day, yeah.
I'm not really that. But I do come from Spangle. I come from a small town, small wheat farming community. And, yeah, so, I don't, man,
Now we lose track of where we're at. Say, we've crossed the 2-hour mark right now, so we're killing it right now.
Crap, dude. No one's gonna watch this for 2 hours.
You would have been the first one. Actually, I had a couple. Actually, my longest one today has actually been Dallas Toller Wade, formerly of Nile. Now he's Narcotic Wasteland. So I think he might set a record here. So I guess was there anything else you wanted to add, or are you done rambling?
Just go to www.themadrigalproject.com. You can buy it's a double album, by the way, double vinyl. You can buy a double vinyl album. You can buy a CD, and you can buy the digital downloads, all at our site. And if you, this is kind of an addendum to that, is that if you're in Europe or the UK, we're also on Burning Shed, which is a online distributor. You can buy it there as well. And it's better if you're over there, it's better if you buy it there because the shipping. If I have to ship it from here over there, it's very expensive. So buy it if you're in the UK. Any of you UK, hey laddie, go buy it. Burning Shed or in the shop.
I don't know. I think that's more. It's like B-style shop. All right, we got the Madrigal project over the shop right here. So yeah.
Really? The record shop. So
I think what they call it too. I know they always say garage or something like that. So yeah.
Trying to get a deal through one of the bigger distributors here in the United States who will be able to get it in a lot more of the brick and mortar stores. You know what I mean? More of the ma and pa stores and stuff. We're in the process of making that happen too. But in the meantime, if you have a computer, you got the record, and please buy the record so I can keep doing them.
Please, for the love of God, to the point we're begging. So,
I'm asking you, buy the record.
Okay, you're all good though. All right.
Yeah, I guess it's Farley.
Well, the big belly and all that stuff. I think you should shut your big yapper. That whole deal, yeah.
Let me give you a little scenario what my life is all about.
Living in a van down by the river. So yeah.
I live in a converted minivan down by the river. Actually, by the river.
Legitimately by the river. So yeah.
That's Chris Farley. We could go on with another hour on that guy. I just loved him. There were only 2 people that I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days when they died, and that was John Lennon and Chris Farley.
Yeah, lost some pretty good voices those days, yeah.
Really thought he was the funniest guy alive.
He was. He was an interesting character, but seemed like a very humbling human being, too. So
yes, very much so. And, he had, and that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand is the insecurities. And a lot of these artists, people like Robin Williams, people are just he killed himself. What? But the truth of the matter is that depression and having, this thing in you, it doesn't go away. You might be in front of 200,000 people just loving you, and it's then all of a sudden you're alone in your hotel room, and that bag of shit is still there. It ain't going away, and he just never could find a way to wrestle those demons, into money, fame doesn't mean anything. It isn't going to change, who you are, and the things that matter to you and the things that affect you. And depression is a disease, it's like anything else. And it's sad because we've lost guys like that. And people don't understand it. They're like, how could that be? He was famous. He had money. People loved him. Yeah, but he had these demons, and he couldn't wrestle them. He did everything he could. He went into rehab. He quit doing drugs. He did everything he could, but he just, and it was the same way with Chris Farley. Although Chris Farley sort of succumbed to what they call the dumb club, the 27 club, where you're young, you get all this fame, all this money, and you just can't handle it. You just, you go off the deep end, and the guy partied way too much. Unfortunate, very unfortunate.
Yeah.
Boy, I wish this interview would have been a little more on the light, happy side, a little less dark.
That's it's your fault. I mean, I was just mainly asking the questions here. So you're good though. I kind of get it too. And,
so, do you have Beelzebub, appearing to you with his demon legion? What? No.
Like, no, Kevin Dodson does not worship the devil. That whole deal.
No, I do not.
That whole deal. All right. But, yeah, we based your questions here pretty good. So here, let's get through the fun ones real quick. So ready? All right. So let's start with the first one right here. I guess, what would you consider is your favorite food currently?
I like probably my favorite would be like Thai food, or just any Asian food. I love Asian, Chinese, Japanese, Cantonese, whatever. I just love that stuff.
Particularly has an Asian heritage, yeah.
Because I'm from America. I'm from America. So I like an occasional hamburger.
Well, of course. So, all right. All right, next one. What would you say is currently your favorite movie?
God, I haven't watched a lot of movies lately. I can tell you that the last movie that I watched that just really affected me was All's Quiet on the Western Front. It's a long movie, but it depicts World War One and the trench war so accurately, and the acting is, beyond good. That movie affected me because the battle scenes are so real it'll freak you out. I mean, war, what a thing. I don't, mankind ruling mankind to his own injury.
Tragically, yeah. So I can see why. All right. So I think you mentioned earlier you don't drink anymore too. So I guess what's your favorite non-alcoholic drink?
Lately, it's been Dr. Pepper. I've been.
We got a doctor, yes.
Pepper. We're all peppers. No, I don't know. The drinking thing, and we could talk about it another time because it's something that a lot of guys out there, people that you watch your show, are probably struggling with. I'm just going to say this. None of the good blessings and things that have happened in my life would have happened or could have happened when I was still drinking. When I quit drinking, my life has gotten so much better. It's worth it. It's painful in the beginning, but it pays off in spades. I drink a lot of iced tea, Dr. Pepper, tea. I drink a lot of just regular, Earl Grey. I like tea. I like caffeine. I like coffee. I like snorting. I like snorting estrogen with straws. No, I'm just kidding.
Let's not go that far. Right.
I don't know what that meant.
I don't know. I think you meant to say a little Coke with the straw. I think that's what you meant. Between lines, as they'd say, yeah. I mean, that was part of a prerequisite back in the day, so I mean, you would know. But congratulations on being sober there too, because I think there's one thing that always does happen with alcohol. There's always a funny story that's involved with it too. So
there's always a funny story and then a tragic story. My alcoholism, and you would have thought that this would have brought me to the door of sobriety a lot quicker. I played a gig one night, and I was drinking. My drink of choice at that time was vodka soda, because my grandfather told me, he was a professional alcoholic. He told me if you don't ever want to get a hangover, don't drink anything with color. Don't have a vodka Coke or vodka 7-Up or vodka orange juice. And he said the reason is because alcohol metabolizes into sugar in your liver. And then if you pile more sugar on top of that with, the mix on it, that's what gives you the headache. And I took that to the bank, and so I always drank vodka soda or, clear. No sugar. Anyway, I had been drinking vodka sodas religiously all night, and then switched over to Fireballs because I didn't listen to my grandfather at that point, because judgment goes out the window when you're drunk. And people were buying them for me, so there they were, shots of Fireball. And then proceeded to do something that I'm ashamed of. And I'm so lucky that I didn't kill myself or someone else. But we were playing at Coeur d'Alene, which is, we're right on the border of Washington, Idaho. And just across the border is Coeur d'Alene, and that's where we were playing. Well, I got really drunk and drove home. And it's I-90 all the way home, right? It's just I-90, and then you just get off on, either Division or Maple and go up to your house. I missed Spokane by 60 miles. I missed Spokane by 60 miles. It ended up on Highway 2 and ended up in Dayton, Washington, which is about, I can't remember how far it is from here. I always say it, I missed it by 60 miles, but it might be a little less than that, a little more, and I just can't remember. But here's how it happened. I wake up, and there's this yellow light blinking that I can't make out, I'm waking up, and I finally ascertain it's a yellow blinking light, and I look over, and there's this old guy opening up a gas station, right? Because the sun's just starting to come up. I'm like, what's happening? Where am I? So I asked the guy, I go, where am I, man? He goes, are you fucking serious? And I said, yeah, I don't know where I am. He goes, well, you're in Dayton, Washington, and you're awful lucky that the sheriff hasn't driven through, because you've been sitting at that light for 45 minutes. I had pulled up on a highway through a small little town, which there's lots of them here, and stopped at a yellow blinking light that you only had to slow down to and then go through. I stopped there and passed out, and then wake up and don't know where I am. And you would have thought that I would have been like, this drinking thing ain't working out too well for me, man. It took a little more. It took a few more things I don't even want to talk about that and I finally got to a point where I realized that there was no choice but to quit. I didn't have a choice, and so I did. And I would tell everybody, no matter how hard it is for you, do it, because you won't believe how much better your life's going to get. It's going to be, I turned a page, man. I know that Adam and Oliver and Billy and all these people would have never happened in my life if I was still drinking. That's the truth.
That's good to hear. And congratulations again there, mate. All right.
Thank you.
And for lots of fun questions, what would you say is currently your favorite song? If you want to list one in the independent world and then one in the mainstream world, go ahead.
Okay, well, my favorite song right now that I've been listening to is a song by a band out of England. Actually, they're known as a Canterbury band, and they're called Camel. And the song is Ice. And like so many progressive rock guitar players, they have blues. It's like they're playing blues guitar, but in a progressive rock setting, for lack of a better way of saying it. But the guitar solo in Andy Latimer, the guitar solo in that song Ice just rips at me every time I hear it. It's so emotional. But that's my favorite song right now. Tomorrow it'll be something else, because I listen to a lot of different music, and in audio production in those days, I used to have to listen to every kind of music because you never knew. Well, your boss might walk into Studio B and say, "Okay, we're going to do some more library production music, and I want you to do a dubstep CD." And I'm like, "What's dubstep?" and I would learn what it was, and I would do it. And the next day it might be, we're going to do some orchestral music, and the next day it might be, we're doing a punk rock CD, or you just didn't know and so you had to be pretty well up on all the different kinds of music. I would say that, and I'm going to have to go back, because this is hard. There's not much new commercial music that I find much satisfaction in. But, and here's the thing. A song like what I'm about to tell you in the 70s could be a hit. It wouldn't even get signed today. It wouldn't even be a song on the radio today. But have you ever heard Paul McCartney, Uncle Albert, Emerald Halsey?
Shoot, I want to say yes, but at the same time, maybe no. And maybe it was just one of those ones played in the background. But I guess go ahead.
Well, it's a hit. It was a big hit in the 70s. Wouldn't be today, but that's one of my favorites. But it's hard, because my brain, I go back to all these songs. I think, oh man, that one. Oh yeah, that one. Oh, there's a whole lot of Steely Dan that was commercially. There was a whole lot of Genesis. I love that song, Land of Confusion. Phil Collins, people say whatever, Phil wrote a song, based on his breakup with his wife that I just think is it's just a beautiful song, so well written and well done, and it's the song Against All Odds. I just think that's a great, very well written, beautiful song. It's just, no matter whether it's progressive or whatever, it's just a great song. There you go.
Yeah, great choices. So, all right, Kevin, we talked for about over 2 hours right now here too, but I guess we're down to one more question. I guess before we jump into it, got any questions for me or any final words you want to say before we jump into it?
What is your demographic, your audience? I mean, does this go out? It's pre-recorded, I take it. We're not live right now, or are we live?
In which case, oh man, these guys talk off a storm. But no, this is pre-recorded.
Okay, so do editing after the fact.
Yeah, it could vary. I mean, I imagine most of the demographics in the 20, the 40 range. So that's at least the majority of it. So can't really speak for everybody. So
That's great. Because that's a demographic that we've seen in our analytics on the social media, that we hit them, but they're not as in there as the 50 to 65-year-olds. That's more what we're seeing, but we are seeing the 35 to 45s are kind of stepping up a little bit too, because thank God a lot of them are discovering this music. Not just my music, but all the great music that's out there. You guys have the benefit, see, being as young as you are, of the last 60, 70 to 100 years of music. Whereas when I was growing up in the 70s, rock and roll was new. It had just come out in the 60s. So I didn't have all that plethora of deep library and stuff. You guys now, you've got all this music going way, way back, that you can avail yourself of. And I think that's great. How awesome that must be to discover, music from 1975 or something that you'd never heard, and you go, whoa, I had no idea. So
I would say, speaking of 75, that's when Jethro Tull's Minstrel in the Gallery came out. So that's my favorite album. So.
You know what? You just mentioned one of my all-time. Don't ever say you don't know prog ever again, because that is a masterpiece progressive rock album. I love that album. That's one of their best. And if you like that one, you should listen to Thick as a Brick, and you should listen to Passion Play.
Aqualung.
You should listen to Aqualung. Major great album. And that album was put out in 1969. You weren't even born, man.
I'm a 90s kid. That's the thing. So, yeah.
Oh, there you go. How old are you?
I'm in my 30s. So.
I love it, man. I love it. I love the fact that you're doing this. You're in your 30s. It's probably a learning thing for you, too. I bet you that all these people you end up talking to, you pick up all these different things from in the music industry and art and music. I'll bet it's just, it's probably why you still do it. Do you have a very large following?
It's working that way. It's slowly and painfully, as I'm sure you've seen throughout your time.
Well, yeah, I know.
So, yeah.
What's the show called?
All Music Matters in that. So, but there was like a company, I don't know, it's probably a writing company too, but it's All Music, and then I just put Matters. And then from where I'm from in Pittsburgh, we actually have certain dialects. So we say and that, we have and that. So we do it like that. So.
Oh, that's like that's sort of in your vernacular in Pittsburgh, do you say? Where you are? Okay.
Correct,
so that's something that everybody locally, your friends, everybody around, they'll say that at the end of a phrase or something. In that, right?
Charge in that. Yeah, that's our deal.
Okay. I like it. I think that's great. It's been fun, man. And educational for me too. And I hope that you got something out of this, and that your folks, or not your folks, well, maybe your parents, but your following, I hope they get something out of it. I hope that they go out and listen to Minstrel in the Gallery, and go out and listen to 11th Hour.
Buy the album, all right, people. There.
Yeah. Purple Blood, all that's good and decent.
Yep. But we are down to the last question right here. So there's nothing else. Here's how it goes. So given what COVID's done, I know you lost some friends along the way here too. I know it was kind of sad right there. So I'm very sorry to hear that. But it's good to see you have come out of it better and stronger. And now you got the Madrigal project. You have a new album too. So it looks like you guys are kicking some ass. But for those musicians who've been impacted by COVID or anything else in their lives, what sort of message of hope could you get to musicians and people out there as we try to move forward in a post-COVID world?
Message of hope. Okay, well, I'm going to have to delve into a bit of a touchy subject to give you my take on what would give us all hope for the future. Okay. I'm not a religious man, I'm a spiritual man. And I believe in a higher power. And I believe that because when I look around, I see absolute, unequivocal evidence of intelligent design. The fact that this is here and that we're here just makes no sense that it was some big bang and we just accidentally climbed out of some primordial stew and became human. And um, there is a spiritual, and I write about it in my music. And if you can read between the lines, you'll get it. Although I say I'm not a religious man, it doesn't mean that I don't read scripture, and I do. And my hope for the future is that is the promise that has been given us by Jehovah God and His Son Jesus Christ. And that hope for the future is that it's not going to be like this forever. We have the ability to have a personal relationship with our Creator. He's open to it. Anyone can have that, you know. And that forms a basis for hope beyond any other man-made or man-thought-up or, you know, current modernistic lifestyle thing can offer you. I know my salvation isn't in playing progressive rock music. I know my salvation isn't in, you know, uh, uh, working a job or what have you. You know, the salvation is in creating, you know, having a relationship with your Creator and knowing that there are certain scriptures that I could allude to. One of them is, you know, all scripture is inspired of God and beneficial for teaching and reproving and setting things straight. And there's a big contention out there of what truth really is now, you know. And when I talk about these things, and please, audience, don't take this wrong. If you're, you know, I'm not putting down the fact that you believe in God, but the Christian nationalist movement, and I just have to say it, it's dangerous. And it's only dangerous because when you mix politics with religion, it has formed the basis for most of the conflicts that men have had since the dawn of human history. And to have the arrogance to say God is on our side, you know, is ridiculous. Because in World War II, the Catholic priests in Germany were blessing troops into war, saying, we got God on our side. While the American and Allied priests were blessing their troops into battle, saying, we got God on our side. That only gave God a bad name. And you know, I had to bring this up and say it this way because to be completely truthful with you, Brian, that is the hope. That is the hope. Salvation only comes through our Creator, period. You know, I mean, what can I say beyond that? You know, that wisdom, you know, beyond any wisdom that mankind can conjure up. We are a we are a very, you know, I mean, if you think about it as a species, with all this technology and everything, what do you think would happen if electricity suddenly wasn't there? It couldn't run any of this, what we consider to be our security blanket. If it went away, we're all just a bunch of naked, scared, frightened apes hiding under a rock. You know, our technology isn't our salvation. Can't be. Our money isn't our salvation. And now I'm starting to sound like a preacher, but I'm just saying, for me, your listeners, they might have a different way of being there, but for me, it's very simple. There's only one pathway to truth and salvation and hope for the future, and that is Jehovah God and Jesus Christ. Sorry. If there's people out there that are atheists, or people out there that are agnostic, or people out there that, I used to feel sorry for people in the program, the Alcoholics Anonymous program, because a big part of that program is having a higher power, and there were people in the programs, like they were either agnostic or atheist, and they didn't believe in God. So what are they going to do, to have a higher power to get sober? There was one guy I heard of that Eddie Munster was his higher power, or the doorknob was his higher power. I don't get that. But if it helped the guy get sober, I guess it's great. But, that's me. That's me. Nobody else has to listen to a word I just said. That's just me. That's my hope for the future. And I believe that it's the hope for mankind. I don't think that it's going to be like this forever. And understand, too, I believe in, and you listen to Boat 5, I believe in prophecy and scripture, and I believe that we are in times that we are seeing prophecy fulfilled, and no man knows exactly, but it seems to me that things are being put in place, so as to bring about the way the way forward for mankind. I believe that.
Amen. And spoke like a true prodigy and a true preacher too. So
thank you.
All right, no worries. All right.
It ain't me. If anything came through me to anybody, it ain't me. I don't claim it. No. If somehow anything I said opens up one person out there to look into it, their spiritual self, and look into it, and it's not me that did it. It's certainly God that did it, that brought them there. And listen. Listen.
Very nice. Right.
Very important. Drop your ego. I think that's the biggest problem now too, is that people are so, easy to have bloated ego, and I mean, maybe it's age too. I'm 65, and I've had enough years behind me to know that we ain't shit, man. I don't care who you are. I don't care, people laud, some musician because he can play, the fastest paradiddles with his kick drums or whatever. He ain't your salvation. It's what I mean. Anyway, I'm belaboring the point.
No, you're all good. So thank you so much for sharing there. It does really mean a lot, Kevin. So
thank you so much for having me, Brian. I'm glad that we were able to open up to each other like that. We don't even really know each other, folks. This is our second time ever even seeing each other and talking to each other. But I think that it's, I think what you're doing is great. And I think that the more opportunity that you can offer other artists, because they're all coming on your show for the same reason, and that's to get their music out there so that, and like you said before, they don't care about the money. They just want to get their music out there, and God bless them. That's what, so what you're doing is very important work, and it's, and keep it up. I just say keep it up, because you're doing a good thing. And thank you for having me. I mean, for the second day the album's been out. And it has been 2.5 hours. And there's about 700 people over here that are expecting me to say something. I got to get somebody to do this. I can't do all of this, man.
I'm going to add some gray hairs to you, before you know it. So
I'll be pulling it out, what's left of. Right? That's the one thing I got left.
I still got the hair. That's all that matters.
Got hair, man.
Okay, just real quick. Can you just list the social media you're on, and then we'll close out of here?
Oh, okay. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I don't think we're on Pinterest yet. But those, X, and we're on, or Twitter.
Twitter.
I call it Twitter.
Tweety.
Yeah, it's Twitix. But yeah, that's what we're on so far.
All right, sounds good. So to close out like this, everyone, my guest today was Kevin Dodson. He's hailing from Spokane, Washington. The one and only Kevin Dodson, we should say. But he's a drummer. He's part of the band, the Madrigal Project, formerly at Madrigal, but it looks like he's kicking some ass out there. Just released some new music, so make sure you go check him out and see what he's been doing. I think at this point we're going to say he's begging, so go buy the album so that he can keep doing his magic too. So, yeah. Kevin, God bless you, mate. So you stay safe because it is a crazy world out there. Rock on. Stay tuned, y'all.
Frog on, my friend, and God bless you. Okay, and keep
Frog
up
on, there you
good work. Keep it up, and
Okay.
go buy my record, people.